Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going, man?
Tony, it's a Saturday morning, and this is the second podcast I'm doing. We don't normally do podcasts on Saturday morning, so to do not only one, but two bonus podcasts today, there's a bunch of stuff going on. I just recorded with Nevada. He had some fascinating stuff, insider nuggets on what Ohio State's actually presenting to JT Tuimoloau, specifics on NIL stuff this weekend. Really interesting stuff. And it was I don't want to wait till Monday to do that. So I just dropped a show with him. That's in your podcast feeds already or on YouTube. And now, oh, by the way, there might be another 5-star coming to town too, super close to joining Ohio State. It's all right, well, we should probably do an emergency episode of Buckeye Weekly too. This is what we do now. Tony and I just sit and stare and talk to each other through Zoom all the time. That's fine. It's cool.
Well, and it's not just me. This is, I believe, is your 10th podcast this week.
I haven't kept track, but that sounds about right. Yeah.
Figure you've had 6 morning scoops, and this will be the 4th Buckeye Weekly this week at Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
If you count the bonus shows we did from camps, it actually is probably more than that. So yeah,
12 or so.
Yeah, 12. Yeah,
I think that's a little bit much.
As long as people keep listening, that's fine. We're here for them. That's fine. As long as people want to listen, we're happy to keep doing it.
But if you give them 42 shows in a week, Tom, that might be a little much.
But eventually, I will have to sleep. Not this week though. Maybe next week.
So you alluded to USC transfer linebacker Palaie Gaoteote, who showed up in the Ohio State directory Friday night, and this annoyed me because I check the directory when stuff like this is happening, and I check it, for Henry To'oTo'o every hour on the hour. I was checking, and I don't even know if it refreshes more than once a day. You know how when you wanted to check your stimulus, the thing on the website says we update it once a day. Stop hitting refresh. That's not what the OSU People Finder says. So you just you hit and the last time I checked for EA, as his friends call him, was Wednesday. So I didn't check Friday. I didn't spend my Friday night checking the OSU People Finder, and that's my fault. But it did show up on our message board, and so. Now, is that the same Palaie Gaoteote? Probably. He was liking some of the tweets of people mentioning this, but Ohio State, I texted Ohio State, and they're like, I have nothing. We don't know anything about this. And so...
what's a moida?
Exactly. But let's just assume, for all intents and purposes, that he is coming to Ohio State. And it is strange to me, Tom, that this has flown... I don't want to say under the radar, but he has flown under the radar about it because he's clearly on Twitter. He's aware of the stuff being talked about, but he has not yet ever come out and said, "Hey, I've transferred to Ohio State."
Yeah, and that may be some kind of an NCAA paperwork thing at this point. You want to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed before you officially say something. That's the only thing I can assume because. All the tea leaves that you could possibly read, once he's in the directory, that means he's officially enrolled. That means that a whole bunch of the paperwork has gone through. That means that, admissions had been cool with it and all that stuff. So it sure seems like that's probably just about a done deal. I think we can probably talk about it as if it's pretty much a done deal. It's not officially yet, but that could take another couple days. And at that point, if we do a podcast on it, then everyone's like, oh, that happened days ago. Why are you just talking about this now?
Yeah. And so that's why we are talking about it now. I keep going back to how this affects the three senior linebackers already on the roster. Because we talked about this with Henry To'oTo'o. You've got Dallas Gant, Taraji Mitchell, and Kayvon Pope, who have waited their turn behind Baron Browning, Tuff Borland, Pete Werner, even Malik Harrison, and all of these guys. They've waited and waited and waited, and now it's their turn. And Ohio State is trying to bring in linebackers out of the from the transfer portal. And I wonder how that impacts their feelings. And not to be all, everybody gets a trophy. Society is so soft right now, but this is a real thing. I have given 3+ years to Ohio State preparing for this, and now are you trying to take this away from me? And so I wonder if this is flying under the radar for Ohio State's purposes, maybe because of that.
Yeah, it could be. And, I think the question is like, where does he slot in with Ohio State? I mean, then there's health concerns that we can talk about in a little bit, but, where does he slot in with the linebackers? Because he played inside for USC. So, probably a Mike or a Will spot. So that would be Dallas Gant, Taraja Mitchell. And, where does Ohio State view him as an every down player? Does Ohio State view him as a situational guy? Because last week at one of the camps, I saw Mitchell Melton. Mitchell Melton does not appear to be anywhere close to playing this fall. So Mitchell Melton is their kind of like big linebacker. He is not really necessarily going to be ready to go this fall. Gaoteote is 6'2", 250. That's where he was listed at USC. Like, that's a big linebacker. So is he maybe more of a situational guy for Ohio State where, if you're playing the fast little spread teams, maybe you're still seeing Taraja Mitchell and Dallas Gant inside because those guys are both like 235 pounds. And then when you're playing a more run heavy team, you're playing in Wisconsin, that's where Gaoteote maybe becomes more of a player for them. Or does he fill that Baron Browning role from last year where he's kind of like, he can play in a couple different spots. He can be the sandbacker against, that kind of team, but also he can sort of be used as an edge rusher because Baron Browning was 6'2", 240 last year, 6'3", 240. Again, that's 10 pounds lighter than Gaoteote. So obviously that's someone who could potentially do the like stand-up edge rush thing as well. So I'm going to be interested to see where he really slots in with this defense. And depending on where it is, he could be in a spot where he is taking a lot of reps from one of those guys, or he could be in a spot where he's taking, reps from a completely different position group if they're looking at him as maybe like an edge rush guy.
That's interesting because I had been viewing like, could he be the Justin Hilliard of this team as that utility guy? You mentioning Baron Browning is actually maybe a little bit more accurate in that, because I was just watching highlights of him just a little bit ago and seeing some of the stuff he does off the edge, and sometimes they would blitz him off the edge. And maybe that's something that is enticing enough. Like, we can't promise you a starting role at Will or Mike, but what we can do is we can give you some of the things that Baron Browning did, turned him into a third-round draft pick or something like that. You can also help out at the Will. You could be a utility guy. There are enough snaps to go around to make you happy. You'll probably get as many snaps as, say, one of the defensive ends, and they're perfectly happy. That type of thing where you may not get 70, but you could get 30, and you'll be full breath for all 30, and you'll be able to give everything for those and be part of the brotherhood, as they say, and make things happen that way. And for me, I think that would be the ideal thing, because really there's nobody to replace what Baron Browning did, because he's a unique human, Baron Browning. But as they move to this 2 linebacker, 1 bullet thing, that creates some, you've pushed all of the linebackers maybe into 2 spots. But I also go back to, as you said, when you're playing a bigger team, what Michigan always had, they had their Viper, who's their starter, their starting bullet, if you will. But they also had a big Sam that they could put in against running teams or on running downs. And maybe he's the big Sam because he's big and he is also able to blitz off the edge. Maybe that's his kind of role. And in that way, he doesn't necessarily take away from Taraja Mitchell or Dallas Gant.
Right. And you have your inside guys. All of their inside guys this year are basically right at 235 pounds. That's Dallas Gant, Taraja Mitchell, Tommy Eichenberg. They're all basically like 6'2", 235, almost identical. At the Sam spot, you've got Craig Young, who's at like 213 or something like that. You got Kayvon Pope, who I think you might think of as the more run-stopping Sam. He's 225. Like, he's 25 pounds lighter than Gaoteote. So that means that to me lays out a pretty clear division of, you've got Craig Young, who's your guy who's in space covering people and on passing plays, and then you got the guy who weighs 35 pounds more than him, who's like the quicker edge rusher guy. That seems like the most logical deployment of him this fall. That then doesn't step on any toes. I mean, I don't think that that's where they necessarily would have deployed Kayvon Pope this year. I don't think that that's necessarily the spot where he I don't view him as a Baron Browning style edge rusher. So that's the spot that makes the most sense to me, that then you're not stepping on Taraja Mitchell's toes. You're not stepping on Dallas Gant's toes. You're not taking anyone off who's kind of waited their turn. I mean, there are all sorts of political considerations that have to go into this. I mean, I don't remember what we titled our show with Henry To'o was, does Ohio State dodge a bullet from the transfer portal? Because this is something that this can be a really disruptive thing in the locker room if you have guys who are popular players who are well liked in the locker room, have kind of been waiting their turn, and then they kind of get usurped from outside weeks before camp starts when they finally think they're going to get a chance to start. So you have to be a little careful of the political considerations there. That's a little bit of a balance, especially with someone like Gaoteote who has some health concerns. It's like, well, if you chase someone away and then he gets hurt, then you go from having one guy you were probably in decent shape with to no one. I mean, that's a concern too. But the fact that they're taking him, the fact that this is something that apparently is working out, tells me that they think that they can do this without chasing Taraja or Dallas away.
And it may have more to do with Cody Simon and Mitchell Melton and the younger guys than necessarily the older guys. Now Gaoteote would have 2 years of eligibility remaining, as would all of the seniors, frankly. You mentioned his injury history, so I went back, and so he entered USC recovering from an injury that he suffered in high school. And then, he started 5 games as a true freshman. I believe he hurt his, I actually had it. I actually wrote it up.
In 2019, he sprained his ankle.
Yes.
Started 7 games, sprained his ankle, then re-aggravated it later. He had 14 tackles against Utah that year. Like he started 5 games as a true freshman. He started the Notre Dame game as a true freshman for USC. Like that is a big game for USC. That is a talented team. He was a starter there. I mean, that shows you what the potential is. 14 tackles against Utah his sophomore year, but sprained his ankle, re-aggravated it, missed a ton of time, only started 7 games that year. And then last year, started the first game against ASU, had 7 tackles, had 2 against Arizona, then got a concussion, missed the rest of the season. So he's missed time all 3 years with injuries. The question is, okay, is he the same guy as he was before all of these injuries? And to me, that's still something of an open question. The one thing, if you want to look at something that's encouraging, is yes, he's missed time all 3 years, but it's not the same injury. This isn't a Cam Babb situation where it's just like knee, over and over and over again. Hey, one time it's a knee, one time it's an ankle, one time it's a concussion. Like these are not, spraining your ankle and getting a concussion are like totally unrelated injuries that are happening. So is it just bad luck? Is there something about his body that doesn't hold up? We don't really know, but I think, you would rather have it be 3 things that might just be like, it might just be bad luck as opposed to like a really structural issue that just he can't hold up. But I mean, it's not great to be hurt all the time, but if you have to be hurt all the time, this is, I guess, the better way for that to have happened.
Yeah. The freshman season missed the first 2 games with knee cartilage surgery in the preseason. And then you mentioned the ankle sprain and then the concussion. Like these are all like, I don't think they're indicative of he's just a brittle person, because these are things that happen to everybody. And then like, oh, he's got bad knees. Look, he got a concussion. Like that's, the two don't, they don't connect. That concussion can happen to anybody. So he gets the concussion and then he hits the portal like 4 weeks later before the UCLA game. Like he transferred out during the season, which I don't know if that's a red flag or not, but I guess at that point at USC, and maybe he just felt like his time was done. But this is a guy who was the number 1 inside linebacker in the 2018 class. Number 2 is Taraja Mitchell. Kayvon Pope was number 9. I believe Dallas Gant was like the number 10 outside linebacker in that class. And Bishop Gorman, as we all know, when Tate Martell and Haskell Garrett and maybe even Ty John Lindsay were all seniors, he was a junior, and he may have been the best player on that team because he looked like Ryan Shazier when, you watch him play out there, and he's just flying everywhere. And I don't know that he can get back to that or has ever actually been that. But I do think that there's certainly a role that is available, and we explained that. With name, image, and likeness also coming into play, you see like Taraja Mitchell and all of these players now. Everybody is like tweeting out this like form letter saying starting on July 1st, this, and this. And Taraji Mitchell's already been like tweeting out logos and stuff. That's another aspect of this that you have to be careful because, I'm sure like these guys are punching in numbers in a calculator like this could be, and then all of a sudden the door opens and somebody just moves into your locker and you're like, well, what about look at my calculator? What happened?
My likeness, my beautiful, beautiful likeness. Yeah, I mean that's something that I talked to Nevada Buck on the very special bonus Saturday episode of the Morning Scoop about is how Ohio State's kind of doing this, and they have different tiers of players to do group naming, group deals. So if you want to have a car wash, there are A players and B players and C players based on status and demand and that kind of stuff. And those are guys who are probably going to demand different levels. You can listen to that Morning Scoop episode to get kind of the specifics there. But if Taraji Mitchell's thinking, hey, I'm going to be an A or a B player if I'm a star this year, and then you go from an A to a B or a B to a C, if you're not playing as much, like, well, does that hurt at all? But on the other hand, are you going to, leave Ohio State, whether you're Taraji Mitchell or Dallas Gant or Kayvon Pope or whoever, leave Ohio State where you have a name and you've been, you're known throughout the fan community and all that kind of stuff, and then go to Virginia Tech or Maryland or wherever else you would go, and like, oh, I'm a starter now here. Well, okay, what's the NIL situation there, and how known are you there? And I mean, there's a million different elements to this whole thing. So I don't know if it's necessarily as clean and clear as, well, if I'm not gonna, if this guy's here too, I'm definitely leaving. There's probably a lot more that goes into it there, and I'm sure that they have been sort of preparing the ground a little bit on this front with the players, both in terms of on-field and off-field implications of this if this happens. Because we had been hearing about this for months and months and months as a possibility. I'm sure this is not blindsiding anyone inside that building either. So that's another piece of it. One other element to this that I talked to Nevada about a little bit, but this is one of these, like, does this really matter? Like, yeah, it actually kind of does. He's Haskell Garrett's cousin. He's Polynesian, like Haskell Garrett, like Tommy Togiai was. I mean, Ohio State has built a little bit of a Polynesian pipeline. Well, they have a gentleman who is Polynesian visiting this weekend. His name is JT Tuimoloau. And you have another guy who is, you sort of share the culture, you share the background a little bit. You're not looking around the locker room and going, there's no one here that looks like me. There's that is a piece of this. Like you want something to feel like home when you're selling a program to a player. That's another thing. It's like one more guy who, you have something in common when you're talking about how they do things back in your ancestral home or where you're from. I mean, it's another piece of the puzzle here. So, that is, I'm sure that is not the deciding factor here by any means, but it's another little ancillary benefit to this. I think they view this as a potential on-field boost to their linebacking core and a little bit of supplementation of the linebacking core. But there are some off-field things as well that could be beneficial to them. And there's a lot about this that seems like there's a lot of possibility here. I don't know. I can't even begin to set like what a reasonable over-under number of tackles or sacks or whatever would be for him this fall. Cause it's like, what's he going to do? How's he going to play? Like, I don't know what to expect about the on-field impact here, but it's like, it's a little more depth. It's a little bit more, if someone else gets hurt, you have another piece there that's an experienced guy who's ready to play, ready to contribute. If he gets hurt, you're in basically the same boat you were before he transferred. So, unless someone else leaves as a result of him coming, it seems like this is fairly win-win.
And for people who are wondering, do they have room? Yes, Ohio State has room. Also, the coach's job isn't to keep Taraji Mitchell or Dallas Gant or Kayvon Pope happy. Their job is to win. And so when you have unproven linebackers, if you can bring in another more proven, I mean, you look back, he had 58 tackles as a sophomore, 38 tackles as a freshman. So this is a guy who I think probably has over 100 tackles now, which I'm assuming is going to be more than maybe twice as many as those three linebackers I just mentioned combined in their careers. So it gives you some more experience. It doesn't necessarily fix anything. Maybe nothing needs fixed, but you don't know that, or maybe they do know that, and that's why they've been trying to bring somebody in. So I don't want to say it's like it is win-win. And if you upset somebody, then like you're not upsetting a starter.
Yeah, I mean, you're not upsetting a returning starter at least.
Right.
So, and the depth there is a concern. I mean, you got to remember back to the spring game, they had long snapper Rowan McCullough filling in at linebacker during the spring game during the second half. Like that's like, yeah, there's not a ton of depth here. I mean, you mentioned like keeping the guys happy who are in the room, and that's not really their job. Do you remember the story of the time that someone asked Tony Alford about, so how do you keep J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber happy? How do you keep guys like that happy? And if you've ever seen the GIF of Tony Alford's head snapping around to the right, and he just kind of nodding, like snapping around to the right, like what? That was the answer to that. That was the answer to that question. Snapped his head around. He's like, how do you keep J.K. Dobbins happy and balance? It's their job to keep me happy. It's not my job to keep them happy. That was essentially the answer from Tony Alford on that. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's like you're coming to Ohio State. They want you to be happy. They want you to be a part of the team. They want you to feel involved. They want you, but a lot of that's on you. And if they don't feel comfortable with where your level of play is or what you can bring to us to a certain situation on the field, that they don't have a guy who's big enough to stand up in certain situations against, say, a Wisconsin. They have to find a guy who's big enough to stand up against Wisconsin and do that kind of stuff. So, that's kind of how that dynamic works. You get recruited and then you get de-recruited. That's a long-standing process in college football. That's part of okay, well, you're not getting recruited anymore. Now you're here. So now let me tell you how the world really works.
So I won't ask you for any tackle numbers. Over under 3.5 starts.
Boy, that's a good question.
I'm going over, but I don't feel good about going over 4.5.
I think I'd go over, but I mean, there's the health stuff. There's the situational stuff. We don't know exactly where he fits. We don't know completely what that defense is going to look like. I mean, I might go under because I think most likely he's a situational guy. If he's the Sam guy, I think you're coming out most teams with like Craig Young or Ronnie Hickman or Court Williams in that bullet spot. I think I would probably go under because of that. And I think it's more of a situational role for him. So, I could very easily see him playing in 15 games this year, even if they do just play 12. But I could see him playing in 15 games this year. But I don't know that I would necessarily project him to start in all that many of those games because he may be one of those, he comes in when it's 3rd and 2 kind of thing, or he comes in, he may start if they play Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game, but not if they're playing a more spread team. I mean, there's a million different factors here, but yeah, I think I would take the under there, but that doesn't necessarily mean I think he's not going to play a lot.
So that's it. That's our coverage of this whole thing. It was worthy of an emergency thing because, like you said, by the time we record on Tuesday, it's going to be almost old news at that point, and who knows what's going to be up at that point. So we wanted to get this out there for you. Bunch of focus on Palaie Gaoteote because he deserves it. It's not just yeah, sure, there's recruiting going on, but there's also like established players here. Let's worry about the kids later on.
And I've read all of our reviews on iTunes, and I haven't once read someone complaining that we have too many episodes. People seem to like new episodes. So, and you keep leaving us nice reviews and talking about how much you like the show. You'll encourage us to do more shows. So that's you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours.
And one last thing before we get out of here, the tiers thing on the NIL stuff from Nevada Buck is really fascinating. I recommend you to go check out the message board, the Ask the Insiders board, or go listen to today's Morning Scoop because it's really interesting. I think really well thought out and could work really, really well. So
yeah, and that's something that theoretically could have an impact with a video game. Like that's not something that's really been openly discussed, but they've talked about group licensing in some way. Like maybe that's a way to do the group licensing piece there. You'd have to multiply that times every program in the nation, but that's the other thing that popped into my mind. One more thing I do want to plug. Bill Green had a fantastic update on his bank blog that he dropped on Saturday morning. We work weekends. Don't worry. We work weekends at BuckeyesScoop.com. Bill Bank Green dropped a fantastic update on the question that is sort of underlying all of the other questions with the JT Tuimoloau visit. So how's it going? That seems like a question that a lot of people would like the answer to right now. Bill sort of beat the bushes, checked with his sources, has a sense for how everyone inside this process thinks this visit is going so far. You will have to be a member of Buckeye Scoop to sign up to access our Ask the Insiders board and find that answer. But good news, it's the price of a crappy chain store pizza. So instead of heartburn, you can get the very best Buckeye coverage there is, and the answer to that burning question. Instead of heartburn, you can get your answers to your burning question. How is the JT2MLO visit going? That is BuckeyeScoop.com. And also, you get a chance to win Nevada's tickets to the Oregon game, 4 tickets to the Oregon game if you're a member. Just have to sign up before July 4th. So go ahead and sign up today. Get your JT2MLO question answered. Get your chance to win Nevada's Oregon tickets. I mean, speaking of win-win, sounds pretty win-win to me.
And there's still recruiting going on, and it's going to be a big month next month as well. So, yes, Tom, we work weekends, so you don't have to. It's like, I don't know, like FedEx or something. I don't know. But thank you all for listening. Thank you guys for watching, and we will talk to you next week. Maybe 6 shows next week. We'll see.